Maria Lopez walked quietly across the wide airfield, her old boots making soft sounds on the concrete. The sun was going down behind the desert hills of Arizona, painting the sky in orange and gold. The air was warm and dry, filled with the faint smell of fuel and metal. Around her, soldiers and mechanics were finishing their shifts, talking loudly and laughing as they walked toward the parking lot. But Maria stayed behind, pushing her cleaning cart toward the big hangar where the Apache helicopters rested for the night. Inside the hangar, the world felt different. It was quiet, only the humming of machines and the echo of her footsteps. The giant helicopter stood in the center, proud and powerful, the H-64 Apache, known for its speed and strength. To most people, it was just a machine, but to Maria, it felt almost alive. Every bolt, every panel, every mark on its metal body told a story. She had seen these aircrafts in action before, years ago, though nobody here knew that. Maria tied her gray hair into a bun and began her work. She took a cloth, dipped it in a bucket, and slowly wiped the side of the Apache. She was careful and gentle, cleaning it the way someone might care for something precious. Her movements were calm and steady. She cleaned the glass cockpit, the long rotor blades, the landing gear. She knew every inch of that helicopter, even though she had never been inside this one. Some of the young mechanics walked by and laughed softly. "Hey Maria, you gonna make it shine enough to see your face in it?" one of them joked. She smiled faintly. "Maybe," she said, without stopping her work. They chuckled and went back to their tools, thinking she was just a quiet cleaner who took her job too seriously. None of them noticed how she paused sometimes, looking at the Apache with eyes full of memories. Memories of noise, dust, and battlefields far away. Maria didn't mind the teasing. She had learned long ago that people often laugh at what they don't understand. What they saw was a middle-aged woman with cleaning gloves and a mop, but what they didn't see was the strength behind her calm face. Her hands, though rough now, had once repaired engines in the heat of war. She didn't need anyone to know that. As the evening deepened, the hangar lights flickered on. The soft yellow light reflected off the helicopter's dark surface. Maria hummed quietly while she worked, a tune she used to sing during her military days. The melody echoed through the empty space, giving the cold hangar a strange kind of warmth. Every so often, a pilot or soldier would walk past, nod politely, or sometimes ignore her completely. To them, she was just part of the background, like the tools, the fuel tanks, or the cleaning supplies. But Maria didn't care about being noticed. She loved being near the aircraft. Cleaning it gave her peace, as if by taking care of the machine, she was also taking care of a piece of her own past. When she finished wiping down one side, she took a step back and looked at her work. The Apache gleamed under the light. She smiled, a small, satisfied smile. No matter what others thought, she knew her job mattered. A clean helicopter wasn't just about looks. It was about respect. These machines carried soldiers into danger and brought them home. They deserved care even after the engines stopped. She remembered a time long ago when she had been part of a maintenance crew overseas. The sound of rotor blades spinning in the hot desert air still echoed in her mind. The long nights, the fear, the teamwork. All of it came back to her when she touched the metal. Those memories were heavy, but she carried them quietly, like a secret medal no one could take away. The bass loudspeaker crackled, announcing the end of the day. Most workers were gone now. The hangar felt peaceful, almost sacred. Maria put away her tools, wiped her hands on her old uniform jacket, and turned off the lights one by one. Before leaving, she looked back at the Apache again. For a moment, her tired eyes softened. To anyone watching, it might have looked like just another janitor finishing her shift. But for Maria, it was more than a job. It was a connection to something that had once defined her life. The soldiers could laugh, the mechanics could tease, but she knew the truth. The Apache was not just a helicopter to her. It was a reminder of who she had been: strong, skilled, and brave. As she walked out into the cool night air, the stars began to appear above the desert. She took a deep breath and smiled faintly. Tomorrow she would come back and do it all again. Quietly, carefully, and with pride. Because for Maria, every wipe of the cloth, every polished panel, was her way of showing respect to the machine that had once carried her through war and now stood still under her gentle hands. What others saw as cleaning, she saw as honoring the past. And though no one yet knew her story, the way she looked at that helicopter said everything. The Apache wasn't just a part of her job, it was a part of her soul. The next morning, the airfield was already alive with noise. The sun had barely risen, and the smell of oil, fuel, and dust filled the hangar. Mechanics shouted instructions to each other, tools clanked, and the deep hum of engines echoed through the open doors. Maria Lopez walked in quietly, just like she did every day. Her old jacket hung loosely on her shoulders, and her hair was tied neatly under a faded cap. She pushed her cleaning cart to the side of the hangar where the big Apache helicopter stood, its dark body shining faintly under the lights. She greeted a few of the young men who worked there. Some smiled politely, but most barely noticed her. They were busy, full of energy and jokes, the kind that soldiers used to fill the silence. Maria didn't mind. She had been around military men long enough to know that teasing was just part of their world. Still, sometimes the laughter stung a little. As she began cleaning near the Apache's landing gear, two young mechanics nearby started talking loudly. "Man, she treats that bird like it's her baby," one of them said, smirking. The other laughed. "Maybe she thinks she's gonna get promoted if it shines enough." They both chuckled, not even trying to whisper. Maria heard every word. She didn't react. Instead, she dipped her cloth into the bucket of water and kept wiping the metal surface in slow, gentle circles. Her movements were careful, almost loving. She focused on her task as if their words didn't exist. But deep inside, she felt a small ache. Not of anger, but of sadness. They didn't know. They had no idea what that helicopter meant to her, or how much of her life had once depended on machines like this. A group of 3 more crew members entered the hangar, laughing and joking. One of them, a tall man named Ryan, pointed toward Maria. "There she goes again, polishing the Apache like it's a sports car," he said loudly. The others laughed. "Hey Maria," he called out. "You missed a spot on the rotor. Better make it perfect or the bird won't fly." Maria turned to look at them. She smiled kindly and said, "Then I'll make sure it shines." Her voice was soft, calm. She didn't sound angry or embarrassed, just gentle. The men were a bit surprised. They expected her to get upset, maybe complain. But she just went back to her work quietly. Ryan shrugged and walked away, but one of the younger soldiers, a new recruit named Daniels, stayed behind watching her. He seemed curious. "Ma'am," he said hesitantly, "why do you always clean the Apache yourself? You could let the others do it." Maria paused for a moment. She looked at the Apache and then at the young man. "Because some things deserve to be treated with respect," she said softly. Then she went back to work, humming quietly to herself. Daniels didn't know what to say. He just nodded and left, her words lingering in his mind. As the hours passed, the hangar became quieter. Most of the morning crew went out for lunch, but Maria stayed behind. She liked the silence. It reminded her of the calm after a mission, when the dust settled and everything seemed still for a while. She walked around the Apache slowly, her hands steady, her eyes focused. She cleaned every mark, every stain, every fingerprint. To others, it might have looked like meaningless work, but to her, it was something sacred. She remembered another time years ago in another desert. Back then, she had been in uniform, not a cleaning jacket. She had stood under the same burning sun, tools in her hands, fixing helicopters that came back from missions full of bullet holes and smoke. She remembered the pilots, brave young men who trusted her and her team to keep them safe. Some came back to thank her. Some never returned at all. Those memories played quietly in her mind while she worked. Each sound, the creak of the metal, the hiss of the cleaning spray, brought those days back to life. She could almost hear the rotors spinning, the radio crackling, the shouts of "clear for takeoff," echoing in her ears. A few of the younger mechanics returned and saw her still working. One of them whispered, "Doesn't she ever get tired?" Another replied, "Maybe she doesn't have anything better to do." They laughed again. But this time Daniels frowned at them. "You don't have to make fun of her," he said quietly. "She's just doing her job." The others shrugged, but they didn't laugh as loudly after that. Something about Maria's calmness, her quiet pride, made it hard to keep joking. Later that afternoon, Captain James Turner, one of the Apache pilots, entered the hangar. He walked past the crew, checking on his aircraft. When he saw Maria polishing the side of his helicopter, he stopped for a moment. There was something about the way she worked, precise, careful, almost like she knew every inch of the machine. "Thank you for keeping her clean," he said politely. Maria looked up and smiled. "My pleasure, Captain. She's a beautiful bird." Turner nodded. "That she is." Then he left, not thinking much more of it. When the day finally ended, the hangar lights dimmed. Maria put away her cleaning supplies, her body tired but her heart peaceful. She didn't care about the laughter or the jokes. What mattered was that the Apache stood there gleaming, ready for another day. She touched the cool metal one last time before leaving and whispered, "Stay safe up there." No one heard her, but if they had, they might have wondered why she spoke to the helicopter like an old friend. Outside, the desert sky was painted with red and gold again, just like the night before. Maria walked slowly back toward her small quarters, her steps steady and quiet. The laughter she had heard that day didn't matter anymore, because deep down, she knew something they didn't. She wasn't just cleaning a helicopter. She was honoring a piece of her past, a part of herself that would always live in the heart of that machine. It was a quiet morning at the base. The sun was bright, and the air shimmered with heat. The hangar doors were wide open, letting in warm desert air that smelled of fuel and dust. Maria Lopez was already there before most of the others arrived. She liked starting early when it was peaceful and still. She felt closest to herself in those quiet hours, just her cleaning cart, and the helicopter that had somehow become her companion. She rolled up her sleeves and got to work. The Apache stood tall and silent, its dark metal skin catching the light. Maria moved around it carefully, cleaning the cockpit glass and polishing the side panels. Her movements were steady, practiced. She worked with the precision of someone who truly cared. Every time she touched the aircraft, a memory from her past flickered in her mind. The sounds of roaring rotors, the shouts of soldiers, the hum of engines before takeoff. But she pushed those memories aside and focused on the present. A few minutes later, Captain James Turner walked into the hangar. He was a young pilot, confident but respectful, the kind of man who had learned discipline early. He was preparing for a flight later that day and came to check on his helicopter. He saw Maria working near it, wiping down the landing skids. He had noticed her before, the quiet woman who always cleaned the Apache with unusual care, but today something caught his eye. As Maria bent down to pick up a rag, her jacket sleeve slipped up, revealing a small, worn patch sewn carefully onto the fabric. Turner's eyes narrowed. The patch was old and faded, but he recognized it immediately. It was a military insignia, the symbol of the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, the elite Night Stalkers. It was not something just anyone could wear. You had to earn it through service, through missions most people never even heard about. Turner froze for a moment. He stared at the patch, then at Maria. She didn't seem to notice his gaze. She was humming softly, lost in her work. After a few seconds, he walked closer. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said gently. Maria looked up, surprised. "Yes, Captain." He pointed toward her jacket. "That patch. May I ask where you got it?" For a second, Maria didn't answer. She looked down at her sleeve, as if she had forgotten it was even there. Her face softened, and her eyes grew distant, filled with something Turner couldn't quite read. A mix of memory and pain. Then, in her quiet voice, she said, "It was mine." Turner blinked. "Yours?" She nodded slowly. "A long time ago." He didn't know what to say. The 160th SOAR wasn't an ordinary unit. It was one of the most elite helicopter regiments in the U.S. Army. Very few people ever served there, and even fewer women. Turner looked at her again. Really looked this time. The way she handled the aircraft, the confidence in her movements, the quiet strength. Suddenly, it all made sense. I didn't mean to pry, he said respectfully. It's just not something you see every day. Maria smiled faintly, her expression calm. It's all right, Captain. Most people don't ask. She went back to wiping the helicopter's surface, but the air between them had changed. Turner felt a strange mix of curiosity and respect. As the day went on, he couldn't stop thinking about her. He asked one of the mechanics, "That cleaning lady Maria, how long has she been here?" The man shrugged. "A couple of years, I think. She doesn't talk much. Comes early, leaves late. Some of the guys joke about her, but she doesn't seem to care." Turner frowned. "Do you know anything about her background?" The mechanic shook his head. "No idea." "Why?" Turner didn't answer. He just looked across the hangar where Maria was working again, the small patch still visible on her sleeve. Later that afternoon, while most of the crew was on break, Turner walked back into the hangar. Maria was sitting on a stool, taking a rare moment to rest. He approached her carefully. "I hope you don't mind me asking," he said, "but were you really part of the 160th? She looked up at him again, this time with a gentle smile. "Yes, Captain. A long time ago. I was a helicopter technician." Turner's eyes widened slightly. "You worked on Apaches?" Maria nodded. "I lived around them for years. I used to fix them, test them, make sure they could go back into the sky. It was my job to keep them safe." He was silent for a moment. "Then why are you here? Cleaning them?" Maria paused, thinking carefully before answering. "Because I still love them," she said softly. "Even if I can't work on them anymore, I can still take care of them. I like to think they remember me." Her words hit him harder than he expected. There was no bitterness in her voice, just quiet pride. He suddenly felt embarrassed remembering how the younger crew often joked about her. They had no idea who she really was. "I didn't know," he said finally. She smiled again, kind but tired. "Most don't, and that's okay." That evening, when the shift ended, Turner stayed behind a little longer. He watched Maria finish cleaning and pack her things. As she walked out, the light from the setting sun caught the patch on her sleeve, making it shine faintly. It was old, torn at the edges, but still full of meaning. Turner stood there, still and thoughtful. He realized that behind that quiet woman was a story no one had cared to ask about. A story of courage, service, and sacrifice. The same hands that now held a rag had once repaired helicopters under fire. The same eyes that watched dust settle on metal had once watched soldiers take off into danger. From that day, Captain Turner never looked at Maria the same way again. And though she didn't speak of her past anymore, the little patch on her sleeve had already spoken louder than any words ever could. Captain James Turner couldn't stop thinking about Maria after that day. Every time he walked into the hangar, his eyes would automatically search for her, the quiet woman with the faded patch on her sleeve. He had seen many people on base, soldiers, mechanics, pilots, and cleaners, but there was something different about her. She carried herself with calmness and quiet pride, the kind that came only from experience, the kind that didn't need to be spoken aloud. The next morning, Turner arrived earlier than usual. The sky was still dim, and the hangar lights glowed softly against the cool desert air. Maria was already there, as always. She stood near the Apache, her hands gloved, her old jacket zipped up, humming a tune while she wiped down the cockpit glass. Turner watched her for a moment before walking closer. "Morning, Maria," he said kindly. She looked up and smiled. "Good morning, Captain." He hesitated, then nodded toward her sleeve. "That patch. I looked it up last night. The 160th. The Night Stalkers. That's quite a unit." Maria paused her cleaning. Her eyes softened, and a small smile formed on her lips, not out of pride but memory. "Yes, it was," she said quietly. "A good unit. The best people I ever knew." Turner leaned on a nearby toolbox. "I've flown a few missions with pilots from that regiment. Toughest group I ever met. I didn't know they had female techs back then." "They didn't have many," she replied simply. "But I was one of them." He was silent for a few seconds. The sound of her rag moving in slow circles filled the space. Finally, he asked softly. What happened? Why did you leave the service? Maria stopped working. For a long moment she didn't answer. Her eyes were distant, focused on something far away, something he couldn't see. I didn't leave by choice, she said finally. There was an explosion during a mission, a base attack overseas. I lost some of my hearing. After that, they told me it was time to go home. Turner felt a lump in his throat. I'm sorry, he said quietly. Maria shook her head. Don't be. I served my time. I did my part. That's all anyone can do. She smiled faintly. Though her eyes carried the weight of memories she didn't want to revisit. For the first time, Turner saw her not as the woman who cleaned the aircraft, but as someone who had once stood on the same side of war as he did. Someone who had sacrificed, who had lived through things most people couldn't imagine. A couple of the younger mechanics entered the hangar, laughing as usual. One of them called out, Hey Captain, you better tell Maria not to clean the bird too much or it'll blind the pilots with the shine. They all chuckled. But Turner didn't laugh. He turned sharply toward them, his voice firm. Show some respect. The hangar went silent. The mechanics looked confused. Turner continued. That woman right there served in the 160th SOAR. She worked on helicopters long before you ever touched a wrench. You wouldn't be flying safe if it weren't for people like her. The laughter died immediately. The men exchanged awkward looks, their smiles fading. Maria looked surprised, not because Turner defended her, but because it was the first time someone had spoken up for her in years. Captain, it's all right, she said softly. They didn't mean any harm. Maybe not, Turner replied. But they need to understand what you've done. Maria gave a small laugh, shaking her head. No one needs to know, Captain. I'm just happy to be near the helicopters again. That's enough for me. Turner studied her for a moment. There was something powerful about her humility, the way she didn't demand respect, even when she deserved it. Do you ever miss it? He asked after a moment. She looked up at the Apache, her eyes gentle but full of emotion. Every day, she said. The sound, the teamwork, the feeling when the blades start turning. You never forget it. But life moves on. I may not fly them or fix them anymore, but I can still take care of them. Turner nodded slowly. You know, he said, I've met soldiers who brag about medals they never earned. But you earned more than most of them and never said a word. Maria smiled softly. The sky remembers, Captain. That's enough for me. They stood there in silence for a while, both looking at the Apache. The aircraft seemed almost alive under the warm light, its blades still, its metal frame reflecting faint shades of gold. When Turner finally left the hangar, he walked differently, slower, more thoughtful. The image of that worn patch stayed in his mind all day. He realized that respect didn't always come with rank or uniform. Sometimes, it came quietly, hidden under years of silence and simple work. That evening, when the other crew members returned, Turner gathered them for a quick talk. I want you all to know something, he said seriously. The woman you see cleaning the hangar isn't just a janitor. She's one of us, a veteran. She worked on Apaches before some of you were even born. So from now on, when she's in here, you treat her the way you'd treat any officer. Understood. They nodded, embarrassed. Some of them glanced toward Maria, who was in the corner putting away her supplies, unaware of what Turner had just said. Later, as Turner was leaving, Maria called out quietly, Thank you, Captain. He turned back and smiled. No, Maria. Thank you. When the hangar lights dimmed and the day came to an end, Maria stayed a few minutes longer, sitting near the Apache. She gently touched the patch on her sleeve, her fingers tracing the edges. It had once meant danger, pride, and purpose. Now it meant peace. For the first time in years, she felt seen, not for the mop in her hand, but for the life she had lived before it. And though she never sought attention, that moment reminded her that true respect never disappears. It just waits until someone finally notices. The next day, news spread quietly around the base. The cleaning lady used to be a soldier. Nobody knew all the details, but everyone was talking about it. Some didn't believe it. Others were shocked. A few felt guilty for laughing at her before. By noon, almost everyone in the hangar had heard that Maria Lopez once served in one of the most elite helicopter units in the U.S. Army, the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment. Maria didn't say anything about it herself. She worked like she always did, calm, quiet, and focused. She didn't brag. She didn't correct anyone. She simply smiled when people greeted her now, the same gentle smile she had worn since the day she started there. But behind those calm eyes, memories began to wake up, one by one, like ghosts from the past she had kept locked away for years. That evening, Captain James Turner found her sitting alone outside the hangar, looking at the setting sun. The desert wind blew softly, and the sky glowed red and gold. He walked over with 2 cups of coffee. "Mind if I sit?" he asked. Maria looked up and smiled. "Not at all." He handed her a cup, and they sat quietly for a while. The air was peaceful, filled only with the hum of faraway engines and the sound of boots crunching on gravel. Finally, Turner spoke. "The guys have been talking," he said. "They found out about your service. They're impressed, and they should be." Maria sighed softly, staring at the fading sunlight. "I never wanted anyone to know," she said. "It's not something I hide, but I just don't talk about it." "Why not?" Turner asked gently. She took a slow sip of her coffee. "Because the past can be heavy, Captain. Sometimes it's easier to let people think you're just a cleaner than to explain what you used to be." Turner nodded slowly. "I get that, but if you don't mind me asking, what was it like?" Maria's eyes softened. "Hard," she said simply, "but also the best years of my life." She leaned back against the wall, her gaze distant. "I joined the Army when I was 21. Back then, very few women worked on combat helicopters. But I loved engines, I loved fixing things. When I got assigned to the 160th, everyone looked at me like I didn't belong. Some even said I wouldn't last a week." Turner smiled faintly. "I bet you proved them wrong." She laughed quietly. "Oh, I did. I worked harder than anyone. I learned every part of the Apache, the rotors, the weapon systems, the engines. I used to stay up all night fixing damaged aircraft so the pilots could fly again in the morning. The men started trusting me. I became part of the team." Her voice softened as she continued. "We went through so much together. The missions were dangerous. Sometimes the helicopters came back full of bullet holes. Sometimes they didn't come back at all." She paused, her fingers tightening around her cup. "I still remember one night in Iraq. We were under attack. I was checking an Apache when the explosion happened. The blast threw me across the hangar. I couldn't hear anything for days after that." Turner's face grew serious. "That's when you got discharged?" Maria nodded. "Yes. The doctor said I'd lost part of my hearing permanently. They told me it was time to go home. But I didn't want to. The military was my family. The sound of those rotors was my heartbeat. Leaving was harder than I can ever explain." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The wind carried the faint sound of a helicopter flying in the distance. Deep, steady, familiar. Maria smiled sadly. "Even after I came home, I couldn't stay away from them. So when I heard there was a cleaning job at this base, I took it. It wasn't about money. I just wanted to be close to the Apaches again. They remind me of who I was, and who I still am." Turner looked at her with deep respect. "You know," he said quietly, "I think you're one of the bravest people I've met. Not because you fought, but because you came back and kept going." Maria chuckled softly. "Bravery isn't about not falling, Captain. It's about getting up again, even when no one's watching." They sat in silence for a while. The sun disappeared completely, and the first stars began to shine. Turner finally stood up. "Thank you for telling me," he said sincerely. "I think the others should hear your story too. It could teach them something." Maria smiled. "Maybe, but I'm happy if they just stop laughing." The next morning, the atmosphere in the hangar was different. People greeted Maria more politely. Some of the mechanics who used to joke now offered to help her carry supplies. Daniels, the young recruit, even saluted her jokingly but respectfully, saying, "Good morning, Sergeant Lopez." She laughed for the first time in a long while. Turner watched the scene from across the hangar and smiled. The truth had changed something, not just how people saw Maria, but how they saw their own work. They realized that everyone around them might have a story, a struggle, a past worth respecting. That afternoon, Maria was wiping down the Apache again. Turner approached her and pointed to the helicopter. "You know," he said, "you've probably touched more Apaches than anyone on this base." Maria smiled. "Maybe, but this one feels special." Turner nodded. "It is, because now we know who's looking after it." She laughed softly. "It's not about who looks after it, Captain. It's about why." He didn't quite understand what she meant, but her words stayed with him long after he left. That night, as Maria walked home, she felt lighter than she had in years. The base lights glowed behind her, and the desert wind brushed against her face. For the first time, she didn't feel invisible. She wasn't just the woman with the mop. She was Maria Lopez, once Sergeant Lopez of the 160th, the one who had kept the Apaches flying. And now, even if her role had changed, her heart was still in the same place, with the machines that had carried her through both war and peace. Days passed quietly after everyone learned about Maria's past. The laughter that once filled the hangar whenever she walked by had disappeared. Now, when Maria entered, the young mechanics and soldiers greeted her with polite smiles or small nods of respect. But Maria didn't act any differently. She still came early, worked quietly, and treated every helicopter like it was something precious. She never cared for attention. She only cared that the Apaches were safe, clean, and cared for just like before. Every morning, Maria arrived before sunrise. The desert air was cool, and the sky was painted in shades of pink and orange. She walked slowly toward the hangar with her cleaning cart, her boots making soft crunches on the sand. Most people thought she came early to finish work before everyone else arrived. But there was another reason. She liked to be alone with the helicopters before the noise began. In those quiet moments, she felt closest to her past, and to herself. As she stood before the Apache, she would sometimes place her hand gently on its side, feeling the cold metal under her palm. "Good morning, old friend," she would whisper softly, like she was talking to someone she once knew. To others, it might have looked strange, but to her, the machine was more than just metal and bolts. It was a symbol of everything she had lived through, her pride, her sacrifice, her memories. One afternoon, as she was cleaning the floor near the back of the hangar, Daniels, the young recruit who used to tease her, walked up and said, "Ma'am, can I ask you something?" Maria looked up and smiled. "Of course, Daniels." He hesitated for a moment, then said, "Why did you come back here? To work as a cleaner? You could have retired. You already did your part." Maria's eyes softened. She leaned against her cart and looked at the Apache standing tall in front of them. "Because I couldn't stay away," she said simply. "When you spend years around something that becomes a part of you, it's hard to let it go. I may not wear a uniform anymore, but this," she gestured toward the helicopter, "this still feels like home." Daniels frowned. "But isn't it hard? Being here but not flying or fixing them like before?" Maria nodded slowly. "It was at first. For a long time, I thought I'd never find peace again after leaving the military. But then I realized I don't need to be in the air to honor what I loved. Just being near these helicopters, taking care of them in my own way, gives me peace. It reminds me that I still have a purpose." Daniels was quiet for a while. He had never thought about it that way. For him, the base was just a job. For Maria, it was something deeper. Later that day, Turner walked into the hangar and saw Maria kneeling beside the Apache, carefully wiping the dust off its landing gear. "You take better care of these birds than anyone else I've met," he said, smiling. Maria chuckled softly. "They've earned it. These machines carry lives. Every scratch tells a story." Turner nodded. "You know, I used to think people like me, the pilots, were the ones keeping the mission alive. But now I see, it's people like you who make sure we can even take off." Maria looked up, her eyes warm. "It takes all of us, Captain. Pilots, mechanics, cleaners, everyone plays a part. That's what I learned in the field." No role is small when the goal is the same. Turner smiled at her wisdom. You really love these helicopters, don't you? I do, she said softly. They remind me of everything I went through, the fear, the courage, the people I lost, and the people I saved. When I'm near them, I feel like I'm still part of something bigger than myself. As the days went on, Maria's quiet dedication began to inspire everyone on the base. The young soldiers started treating their jobs with more care. They cleaned their tools more thoroughly, double-checked their work, and even stayed late to help her finish cleaning the hangar. Daniels often worked beside her, asking questions about her old missions. She never went into full detail. Some memories were too painful, but she shared small stories that taught him lessons about teamwork, patience, and respect. One night, after everyone had left, Maria stayed behind to finish wiping down the Apache. The hangar was silent except for the hum of the night lights. She took off her gloves and ran her fingers gently along the metal surface. You're still as beautiful as ever, she whispered. As she stood there, she remembered a moment from her time overseas, standing in the same kind of hangar, but with explosions echoing in the distance. She remembered holding a wrench, her heart racing, her teammates shouting instructions. She remembered the smell of oil, the heat, and the determination that kept them all going. Tears filled her eyes, but she smiled through them. Those days were gone, but the spirit of them lived on here, in the calm hum of this quiet base. When she finally turned to leave, she noticed Turner standing at the hangar door, watching her. You okay, Maria? He asked softly. She nodded. Just remembering, she said. He walked up beside her. I think you staying here means more than you realize. You remind everyone what this place stands for. Maria smiled faintly. Maybe, but I stay because it reminds me who I am. This place, these helicopters, they saved me once. And now they keep me going. Turner looked at her for a moment, then said, You know, I think this Apache flies a little prouder because of you. She laughed quietly. Maybe it does, Captain. Maybe it does. As she walked out of the hangar into the cool night, she looked up at the stars. The air was still peaceful. She felt tired but content. Every day she spent here was another reminder that purpose doesn't end when a uniform comes off. Sometimes purpose just changes shape. To the world, she might have seemed like a simple cleaning lady. But in truth, Maria Lopez was still serving, in her own quiet way, with the same heart, the same pride, and the same love for the Apache that had once carried her through the skies of war. A few weeks had passed since the day everyone learned about Maria's past. The mood around the base had changed completely. People respected her now, even admired her. But there was one person who couldn't stop thinking about the way he had treated her before. Sergeant Blake. He was one of the loudest men in the hangar, always joking, always acting like he knew everything. He was also one of the first to laugh at Maria when she had started cleaning the Apache. Every time he saw her now, a feeling of guilt tightened in his chest. He remembered the day he had laughed when she carefully polished the Apache's tail, calling her the base's maid. He remembered how she never said a word, just smiled and kept working. But after hearing about her past, about the patch she wore, about how she had once risked her life working on helicopters in war zones, he couldn't look her in the eye. One morning, Blake walked into the hangar early. He didn't expect anyone to be there, but Maria was already working as usual. The sun hadn't fully risen yet, and golden light poured through the big metal doors, glinting off the helicopter's smooth body. She was wiping the cockpit glass, humming softly to herself. Blake stood there for a moment watching her. He didn't know how to start the conversation. He had said sorry to people before, but this time it felt different. He wasn't just apologizing for words. He was apologizing for judging someone he didn't understand. Finally, he took a deep breath and walked closer. Morning, ma'am, he said awkwardly. Maria turned, surprised to see him. Good morning, Sergeant Blake, she said kindly. You're here early. He rubbed the back of his neck. Yeah. Couldn't sleep. He hesitated, then looked down at the floor. Listen, I've been meaning to talk to you. Maria stopped what she was doing and gave him her full attention. Of course. What's on your mind? He took another deep breath. I owe you an apology, he said quietly, for the way I acted before, for laughing at you, for treating you like you were less than us. Maria looked at him for a long moment, her expression calm. You don't have to apologize, Sergeant. People say things. It's okay. No, it's not, he said quickly. I was a jerk. I didn't know who you were, but that shouldn't have mattered. I thought you were just some cleaner. I never even thought that maybe you had a story, that you had done things, seen things. His voice cracked a little. When I heard about what you did, I felt ashamed. I should have respected you from day one. Maria smiled softly and shook her head. Blake, you're not the first person to judge too quickly. We all do it sometimes. What matters is that you learned. Blake looked relieved but still uneasy. Still, I wanted you to know I'm sorry. Truly. Maria placed her rag on the cart and stepped closer. Apology accepted, she said gently. Then she smiled. And for the record, you don't have to call me ma'am. Just Maria. He laughed awkwardly. Yes, I mean Maria. They both chuckled. The tension between them faded a little, replaced by something lighter. As the day went on, word spread that Blake had apologized. Daniels, Turner, and a few others noticed the change in his attitude. He stopped making jokes about others and started helping more around the hangar. One afternoon, Maria caught him carefully checking a toolbox, making sure everything was in the right place. When she walked by, he looked up and grinned. Trying to make things a little easier for you, he said. Maria laughed softly. That's kind of you, Sergeant. Thank you. From that day, Blake began working differently. He treated everyone with more patience, more respect. He even started telling the younger recruits about Maria's story, not to embarrass her, but to teach them something. See that lady over there? He would say, nodding toward her. That's Maria Lopez. Used to work on Apaches in combat zones. Tough as nails. If you ever think your job's too hard, remember what she's been through. At first, Maria felt shy when she overheard him, but she understood his intentions. He wasn't trying to make her a hero. He was trying to remind everyone that respect should never depend on someone's title or job. One evening, Turner gathered everyone for a quick meeting before a training flight. As usual, Maria was cleaning nearby, quietly going about her work. Turner glanced at her and then at his team. Before we wrap up, he said, I want to say something. Everyone turned to him. We talk a lot about teamwork here, he continued, about how everyone matters. But I think we all learned what that really means thanks to one person. He looked toward Maria. She reminds us that it doesn't matter what position you hold. What matters is the heart you bring to your work. Maria froze, surprised. Everyone turned to look at her. She felt her face flush, but before she could speak, Blake stepped forward. Captain's right, he said loudly. We used to take her for granted. Not anymore. She's one of us. The hangar went silent for a second, and then someone started clapping. Soon everyone joined in. The sound echoed through the metal walls, filling the air with warmth. Maria blinked back tears. She wasn't used to being in the spotlight, and she didn't want praise. But in that moment, she felt something deep, not pride, but belonging. Later that night, as the hangar emptied, Blake walked over one last time. You know, Maria, he said quietly, you taught us something we don't learn in training: humility. She smiled. And you reminded me that people can change. They shook hands, a gesture of mutual respect. Not between a soldier and a cleaner, but between two people who had learned to see each other as equals. As Maria finished cleaning and stepped outside, the night sky stretched wide and calm above her. The wind brushed past, carrying faint echoes of laughter and voices from the hangar. She smiled to herself, knowing that forgiveness, both given and received, had the power to heal more than any uniform or rank ever could. That night, for the first time in many years, Maria slept peacefully, her heart finally free from the weight of the past, surrounded by a new kind of family who saw her not for what she used to be, but for who she truly was. A few months had passed since everything changed at the base. The laughter that once followed Maria was now replaced by smiles of respect and greetings filled with warmth. Everyone, from the youngest mechanic to the senior pilots, treated her as part of the team. Maria had never asked for it. She had never wanted attention, but deep inside, she felt a quiet happiness she hadn't known in years. Every day was almost the same. She cleaned the hangar, polished the Apache, made sure the floors shined and kept the place in order. But there was a new feeling in her heart now. The soldiers didn't just see her as the cleaner anymore. They saw her as a symbol, a reminder that no job was small, and that everyone had a story worth respecting. One morning, Captain Turner called everyone for a short meeting. He stood in front of the Apache, his hands behind his back, looking serious but calm. "We have a special flight today," he announced. "Command has requested an honor flyover for Veterans Day. I'll be flying this Apache." He paused and smiled faintly. "But there's something else I want to add." Everyone looked at him curiously. "I've been thinking about how much this base has changed," he continued. "And I realized it's not because of new equipment or new orders. It's because of one person who reminded us what respect and dedication really mean." He turned toward Maria, who stood quietly at the edge of the hangar with her cleaning cart. "I'm talking about Maria Lopez," he said firmly. Maria froze. The others turned toward her, smiling proudly. She felt her heart start to race. "Captain," she said softly, embarrassed, "I don't deserve any special mention. I just do my work." Turner shook his head. "That's exactly why you do deserve it," he said. "You remind us that every role, no matter how small it looks, has value. You've done more for morale here than any speech or medal ever could." Before Maria could respond, Turner added, "That's why today's flyover is dedicated to you." Maria's eyes widened. "To me?" she whispered. "Yes," he said with a smile. "To Sergeant Maria Lopez, the woman who once kept the Apaches flying in war, and still keeps them shining in peace." For a moment, she didn't know what to say. The hangar went quiet. Then, slowly people began to clap. Softly at first, then louder, until the entire hangar echoed with applause. Maria covered her mouth, tears filling her eyes. She had never imagined something like this. After the meeting, Turner approached her and said, "We'd like you to place your patch on the Apache before we take off, as a sign of respect." She blinked, still holding back tears. "My patch," he nodded. "You earned it. It belongs there." Maria reached into her pocket and pulled out the small cloth patch she always carried. Faded and a little torn, but precious to her. It was the emblem of the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, the unit she had once served. For years, she had kept it hidden, folded carefully, as a memory of a life she thought was gone forever. Now, with trembling hands, she climbed up the small ladder and gently pressed it onto the side of the Apache, just below the cockpit window. "There," she whispered. "Stay proud, old friend." Everyone watched in silence. When she climbed down, Turner saluted her. "Thank you, Sergeant," he said. Maria returned the salute, her eyes shining. "Thank you, Captain, for remembering." A few minutes later, the engines roared to life. The sound was deep and powerful, shaking the air. Maria stood a few steps back, her heart pounding as she watched Turner climb into the cockpit. The blades began to spin faster, slicing the morning air. Dust swirled around her boots, and she had to shield her eyes from the wind. When the Apache finally lifted off the ground, the sun was rising behind it, turning the sky into a canvas of gold and orange. Maria watched it climb higher, feeling her chest tighten with emotion. The sight of the Apache soaring above the base brought back a flood of memories. The late nights in war zones, the teamwork, the loss, the courage, the sound of rotor blades cutting through fear itself. As the helicopter made a graceful circle over the base, Turner's voice came over the loudspeaker. "This flight is for Sergeant Maria Lopez, for her service, her sacrifice, and her heart that never stopped serving." Everyone standing in the yard looked up and clapped as the Apache thundered overhead. Maria couldn't move. Tears streamed down her face, but she was smiling. A deep, proud smile that came from the very core of her being. She whispered to herself, "Once an Apache mechanic, always an Apache mechanic." When the helicopter returned and landed, Turner stepped out and walked straight to her. He handed her a small, polished plaque. It read, "In honor of Sergeant Maria Lopez, who reminded us that true service never ends." Maria stared at it, her fingers tracing the letters. "This is too much," she said softly. Turner shook his head. "No, Maria. It's the least we can do." For the rest of that day, people came up to her, thanking her, shaking her hand. Daniels even brought her a small bouquet of desert flowers, saying, "For our guardian of the Apache." She laughed and hugged him. That evening, after everyone had gone, Maria stayed behind one last time. The hangar was quiet again, the Apache resting peacefully under the dim lights. She walked up to it and placed her hand gently on the metal just below where her patch now sat. "You've carried me through so much," she whispered, "and now you've given me peace." For a long moment, she stood there in silence, listening to the faint hum of the cooling engine. The air was still warm, but inside, her heart felt calm. She wasn't a soldier anymore, not officially, but in her soul, she knew she would always be one. As she turned off the lights and walked toward the door, she glanced back one last time. The Apache gleamed softly in the shadows, her patch visible on its side like a quiet signature. Maria smiled. "Rest well, my friend," she said. Outside, the stars shone over the vast desert sky. The sound of the rotors still echoed faintly in her mind. The rhythm of her past, her pride, and her purpose. And for the first time in a long time, Maria Lopez knew she was exactly where she belonged.